Good evening, youth. I think today's kind of conversation and stuff might function a little bit less like last week's was kind of like a message. This might be more like a Devo or something. But I've been trying to choose discussion topics and things to share that I think can relate to us right now and maybe where not everyone, but someone might be at. And I think today's kind of functions that way. I I know you hear this all the time. I teach a Bible class, and and this is going to come from that once again. But one of my favorite stories that I share in that Bible class is that of a woman named Hagar. She's a maid servant of Sarai, the wife of Abram in the Old Testament, who would eventually become Abraham and Sarah, Father Abraham, with his many sons and all that good stuff. But he wasn't always Father Abraham. For 100 years, he was Abram, and he did not have a child. And she was Sarai, and she was not a mother of nations. She was a mother of none. And that was very painful for her. In the Bible, it talks about that. In fact, in Genesis chapter 16, it says this: Abram's wife Sarai had not borne him children, but she owned an Egyptian slave named Hagar. And Sarai said to Abram, "Since the Lord has prevented me from bearing children, go to my slave, and perhaps I can have children by her." And this kind of sets off this string of events, but I don't really want to focus on Abram or Sarai. I want to focus on Hagar. You see, she was an Egyptian slave living in a foreign land, which is that's gotta be a tough position to be in. I can't even imagine that being my experience. She was probably experiencing extreme loneliness and whatever else it might be. We see that things get worse for her, but that's a hard position to be in, a slave in a foreign land. And now you're being forced to be with your master, and that's not her decision. She's owned by somebody else. And so let's see where this story takes her. We're going to be reading in Genesis chapter 16. If you want to follow along in Bibles or anything like that, you can do so. Abraham agreed to what Sarai said. So he took Hagar, the Egyptian slave, and she was made a wife for him. This happened after Abram had lived in the land of Canaan for 10 years. He slept with Hagar, and she became pregnant. And when she realized that she was pregnant, she began to look down on her mistress. So we see that she kind of gained some status by doing what Sarai cannot do. Abram takes Hagar as a wife, and she almost, it seems, immediately conceives and now has a child. And Sarai has not been able to do this. And so she looks down on Sarai, thinking herself to be better than her. Then Sarai said to Abram, "You are responsible for my suffering." What? It wasn't even his idea. It was hers. She says, "You are responsible for my suffering. I put my slave in your arms, and ever since she saw that she was pregnant, she has looked down on me. May the Lord judge between me and you." Abram replied to Sarai, "Here, your slave is in your hands. Do whatever you want with her." So Abram's like, "Look, I'm not responsible for this. You do what you want. You can handle this. She's your slave." And so Sarai mistreated her so much that she ran away from her. So we see Hagar flee. She runs away because Sarai begins to mistreat her. Some translations say abuse her, actually. And so she runs away. And this is the part of this message that I really want us to remember. I think this is really key. The angel of the Lord found her by a spring of water in the wilderness, the spring on the way to Shur. And he said, "Hagar, slave of Sarai, where have you come from, and where are you going?" I mean, he knows, but he gives her the opportunity to share. She replied, I am running away from my mistress, Sarai. Then the angel of the Lord said to her, You must go back to your mistress and submit to her mistreatment. The angel of the Lord also said to her, I will greatly multiply your offspring, and they will be too many to count. You have conceived, and you shall have a son, and you will name him Ishmael. For the Lord has heard your cry of affliction. This man will be like a wild donkey. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand will be against him. He will live at odds with all his brothers. So the angel of the Lord says, you got to go back, and you're going to live with Sarai and Abraham, or Sarai and Abram, but here's what's going to happen. You will be a mother of nations. You will have a son who will be this wild donkey of a man. He's going to be at odds with everybody, but he will be strong. God has heard you. That's the big thing. God has heard you. So she named the Lord who spoke to her. She gives a name to this God. She was Egyptian. She didn't worship this God of Abram. Many people did not. They're not a nation yet. But she now knows that who this God is, and she recognizes him. So she named the Lord who spoke to her, the God who sees. She named him the God who sees. For she said, Have I really seen here the one who sees me? She's like, I have witnessed the God who has seen me and who has taken care of me. And that is why she named the spring a well of the living one who sees me. It is located between Kadesh and Bered. So she gave birth to Abram's son, and Abram gave him the name Ishmael. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael to him. God saw her, and God took care of her. And we're going to go forward a little bit in this story to see the result of it, because this hers and Ishmael's story is not over. So in Genesis chapter 21, a few chapters later, we see that Abram, 13 years later, he and Sarai have Isaac. Even though there's this moment where they are faithless and they choose to give Abram this servant woman to have a child by, God is still faithful to Sarah and to Abraham. And he even, which is what their names are at this point, and even has a little bit of fun with them. He tells them to name the son Isaac because both of them at different moments actually laugh when they hear about that they're going to have children at 190 respectively, or I think are their ages. So they laugh, and so God says, all right, name him Isaac, which means laughter. So Isaac is born, and we see in verse 8 that Isaac is being weaned. So he's getting a little bit older, getting a little bit bigger at this point, and Ishmael gets himself into some trouble. The child grew and was weaned, and Abraham held a great feast on the day that Isaac was weaned. But Sarah saw the son mocking, the one that Hagar the Egyptian had borne to Abraham. So we see 13-year-old Ishmael is making some sort of joke at Isaac's expense, it seems. He's mocking, making fun of something. He's 13 years old. I guess it's to be expected. I know we've got probably some sarcastic 13-year-olds watching this right now, right? Well, his consequences are pretty severe. So Sarah said to Abraham, Drive out this slave and her son, for the son of this slave will not be the co-inheritor with my son Isaac. So she says, get him out of here. Get him out of here. He's not going to share in the inheritance with our new son, our son, the one that we bore. Now, this was a very difficult thing for Abraham to do because Ishmael was his son. That makes sense. He doesn't want to kick his son out. But God said to Abraham, Do not be concerned about the boy and your slave. Whatever Sarah says to you, listen to her, because your offspring will be traced through Isaac. But I will also make a nation of the slave's son, because he is your offspring. So God says, I will provide. But she's right. I've chosen Isaac years before even Ishmael was born. God chose Isaac to be Sarah and Abraham's son. Ishmael was not the original part of God's plan, but God says, okay, we'll make something happen with Isaac. That's okay. Sorry, I keep getting emails on here as well. I'm still teaching, So, also, my roommate stayed home to play some Warzone. You can hear that too. There's all sorts of good stuff happening. Early in the morning, Abraham got up and he took bread and a water skin and he put them on Hagar's shoulders and sent her and the boy away. She left and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba. When the water in the skin was gone, she left the boy under one of the bushes. So she gets sent out with just bread and water into the wilderness, into the desert, and Abraham's like, you're on your own. You're going to have to make it happen. Okay? I mean, both of these situations have been Hagar at rock bottom. Immigrant, refugee, basically, living in a land that is not her own. Slave, pregnant, and now with a young child wandering in the wilderness. She's at rock bottom. It cannot get any lower than this. In fact, listen to what she says here. Then she went and she sat down nearby, about a bow shot away from where she laid Ishmael, and she said, I cannot bear to watch the boy die. The water in the skin is gone, and she's in the desert. She and her son they're going to die. They're at rock bottom. It can't get worse than this. And she sat nearby and wept loudly. I mean, this is the end for her. She's done. But she met the God who sees her, and he's back in this moment. God heard the voice of the boy, and the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, what is wrong? Don't be afraid, for God has heard the voice of your boy from the place where he is. Get up and help the boy up and sustain him, for I will make him into a great nation. God says, I haven't forgotten my promise. Even though you feel like it can't get worse, even though you feel like you're at the end of your story, did God not tell you that he would make you into a great nation? Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water, and she went and she filled the water skin, and she gave the boy a drink. I don't know if the well was there before and she could not see it, or maybe God placed it there for her and Ishmael. But I know that we serve a God who provides. I know that we serve a God who hears us, and we serve a God who sees us. That's what she names this God. She doesn't know his name is Yahweh or Jehovah. She doesn't know that one day Jesus will come from this line of Abraham. She doesn't know any of this. She just knows that when she needed him, he was there. And you might find yourself in that same place where you need him, and he will be there. God was with the boy, and he grew. He settled in the wilderness and became an archer. He settled in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother got a wife for him from the land of Egypt. It's a beautiful story. I love that my God hears me. I love that my God sees me. It doesn't always feel that way. I can't imagine that when she went and returned to Sarah and suffered her mistreatment, that she always felt seen or heard or whatever the case may be. But our God is faithful even when we are sometimes faithless, even when we are sometimes hopeless, even when we are sometimes lost or we feel forgotten. God is always working. I love the song that we sing at church all the time. Even when I can't feel it, you're moving. Even when I don't see it, you're working, right? That's the God that I serve. We see two instances in this story where people lose hope and lose faith. We see it first with Sarai when she's like, I'm never having a kid. Here's my maid. Maybe you can make something happen there. Then we see it here with Hagar where she's like, I can't bear to watch my boy die. In both instances, they had received promises from God about their sons. Sarai was promised that she would have a son with Abraham, but she felt she was too old and that it would never happen. Hagar was promised that her son that she would bear would be a father of a nation and that he would be a wild donkey of a man, and she loses hope and thinks that he's going to die. if God has made a promise to you, hold on to that and keep it, because even if you don't feel it, even if you don't see it, he's still working and he will still provide. He will still take care of you. He hears you and he sees you. So here's what I want us to do. Here's how I want us to apply it. You might find yourself where you're feeling a little bit like Hagar, like you're at rock bottom, you're lost, you're hurting, you don't feel seen or heard, and you're in need of comfort. Call upon God and he will give that to you. But if that's not you, if you're kind of in a good place, or you're feeling close, you're feeling heard, you're feeling seen, you've been comforted, as we talked about last week, it's time to find someone who you can give that comfort to. Who is that person that's not being seen right now? I give the same assignment to my students. The assignment's called God Sees You. I've done it every quarter. I challenge them, I'm like, who's that person in your life that needs to be seen? Who is it that, and I give this assignment every quarter, I'm like, who is it in your life that, like, nobody sees them? No one sees the hurt that they're going through. No one sees that they are alone. And then you go out and you find them and you do something for them, and then you write about it. And I tell them, I'm like, don't write the name of the person. Yeah, like I would feel bad if I got a assignment that was like, Mr. Shaw eats alone every day and he seems very lonely and very much in pain. Like, so I tell them, I'm like, you don't need to write the name of the person, but tell me what you did and tell me how that went. I'm like, who is someone that you can see because no one else sees them? And I've given that assignment every quarter, but the most recent time I gave it, I received one back that said, no one sees me. And it was a student who was very much in pain. And I realized that might be you. And please, like, let me know how I can be there for you. But I know in those moments it's hard to ask for help. It's hard to reach out because you feel like you're alone. So I hope you know that you're not alone, and I pray that you'll let me in and you'll invite me into your situation, whatever it might be, because I want to be there for you, and I'm going to do my best to see you the way that God sees you. So that's our challenge for this week. I hope that you'll hop on our Zoom tonight and you'll join in the conversation about this topic, and maybe we can find some ways that we can be there for our loved ones in our lives that need to be seen. Thank you guys for listening. I'm going to pray and then sign off. Dear Jesus, thank you for today. Thank you that you are a God who sees us. You saw us as humanity, and you cared enough to send your only Son to die for us. We did not deserve it, but you did so. I pray that we will see your children, your sons and your daughters, the way that you see them, that we can love them and take care of them and bring them comfort, God. I pray that we will be faithful because you are always faithful to us, and that we can trust that, Jesus. And thank you that we are never alone. In your name we pray. Amen.